I mean, the most shocking thing for me, the first day I was a chaplain at university, I had office hours, and somebody on the Islamic Society committee came into the office, on the committee that runs the whole Islamic Society. And this person sat there and said, I'm not sure if God exists anymore.
Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Beyond the Minbar podcast. I am your host Muhammad Basaeed, and today here at Beyond the Minbar, it is a beautiful day. Allahumma barik. I am honored and blessed to have a special guest with me that I haven't seen for a while, but I do try and keep in touch with him. May Allah bless him. I'm joined with none other than Ustadh Hisham. Assalamu alaikum. Ustadh, how are you?
Alhamdulillah, all is well.
You good?
Better now I've seen you.
Jazakallah khair, Allah barik feek. Likewise, mashallah. It's been a while since we've seen each other. You know, we do keep in touch in the virtual world, as they say.
Of course.
You know, but I think the last time I seen you was for a conference.
Correct.
It was the Clouded Minds
Clouded
conference.
Minds, maybe, yes.
Yeah, Clouded Minds conference. How you been since then?
Alhamdulillah, I've been well.
How's family?
Family's well. It's growing.
Allah bless your family.
3 kids now, alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah.
Juggle. Yeah,
Allah barik. Allah bless all of them.
Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen.
Now, Ustadh, in the past, you know, you've done a lot in terms of the field of da'wah, mashallah, tabarakallah, and you've also done work in universities as a chaplain, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So, tell me a bit more about how you got into chaplaincy at university.
So it's an interesting story. I went to university to study electrical engineering.
MashaAllah.
Prior to that, I was born and bred in the UAE. I studied Sharia in the UAE. I studied the traditional manner. And my background before coming to the UK was I was a khatib in some of the local masajid in the UAE. I was teaching Islamic studies to children. So with that background, I came to the UK studying engineering, and found myself suddenly considered somebody knowledgeable in comparison to my peers. So I started teaching some evening classes, and initially I started teaching some classes in the evenings for the university students. And I remember that I was teaching some text. I can't remember what it was at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that when we came to the Q&A, someone asked me, do you really have to wipe your head in wudu? And I realized to myself, we're in a different league, different ball game.
Yeah.
The people around here, do they have a foundation? Do they not foundation?
Yeah.
And what followed was the university appointed me as a Muslim chaplain. So I had a pastoral duty to look after the Muslim university students.
Mashallah.
I had a duty to interact with the other faiths, and had a duty to advise the university in terms of policy. And that happened just because I was doing a lot of stuff with the Muslim students. I kind of fell into that role, and it wasn't something planned. When I started traveling around to other university campuses to give talks and things like that, and I noticed as I did that, there was like some groundwork missing. So what would normally be a primary and secondary education in a Muslim country, that kind of the basics, there was a hole. And so there was that when the university students, when Muslims come to university, many of them away from their parents, they're hungry, they're on a journey to explore, they're open to explore new hobbies, new societies, new sports, so they're in that mood. And for me, I realized, like, that's the opportunity. That's probably the last time they're going to be in that mood before work, family, house, costs consume them. And so I realized I have this unique opportunity, these people who are hungry to learn, and they're looking for something, but there's nothing to provide them. And so it started, I just kind of fell into it.
So this was a lot of work with the ISOCs then, the
Correct,
Islamic
yes.
societies within other universities.
That's right.
Mashallah. Now, when you say that the foundations, like, they were missing, is that because when Muslim university students are in university, there was no kind of push, or maybe they never had any Islamic education prior to that, so they primarily focused on making sure they get into university and they study what they need to study, and then when they arrive, it's like, I'll join Islamic society in order to keep myself safeguarded from the fitna of university, and then in there, that's when there's an opportunity to teach them.
I would say the problem starts far before, it starts beyond and before university.
Okay.
It's the roots is at the kind of younger childhood years, vast majority of parents, single working families or dual parent working families, madrasah is a form of childcare, right? Just chuck the kids in, forget about them, I got too much on, right? Just a couple of hours to just breathe, right? Chuck the kids in madrasah 5 evenings a week. What are they being taught in madrasah? Alif, ba, ta, qaida nuraniya, brilliant. What do they know and understand about Islam? Very little. They learn to recite, they don't learn to understand. So what a 9-year-old knows about zakah and a 17-year-old knows about zakah is the same. Right. The other issue is you have this vacuum, this vortex post 14. Once they turn 14, 15, they say, okay, most Islamic studies, structured Islamic studies, stop at that time because of GCSEs, A levels, etc. That's the danger age. That's when peer pressure, drugs, girls, boys, all of that starts to kick into play. The hormones start to kick into play then. So that's one side of things. The provision, the Islamic studies provision, or the structured education provision, isn't really there at that age. The second issue is, I call it like immigrant survival complex. The vast majority of these Muslims coming to university, they're either first, second or third generation immigrants. And there is a push from their parents, accountancy, law, engineering, dentistry, medicine, pharmacy. The moment the world of GCSEs hits, that pressure is there. Everything else becomes secondary. Everything else is seen as taking away from that perfect career path. And so because of that, they come to university burnt out. They've worked out all their personal statements and their A-levels and all. They come to university and they have actually no clue what to do. Their spiritual development was never part of the plan, was never prioritized. And then they find themselves in the lap of the ISOC, the Islamic Society. And the Islamic Society tends to be more of a community bubble. Socials, salah together. It's and to some people who are not as practicing or who find themselves on the outskirts, they look in and they find it a bit cliquey. Like, oh, I don't really fit in with these guys. So some people feel that way. So that's where the challenge is. So then they come to university. Vast majority of them don't have a foundational Islamic knowledge. And they kind of lost as to what do I do next. Their fuel is snippets, talks, random motivational lectures, the effect of which lasts about 1 hour, 2-3 hours, 1 week, and then you've forgotten. So that momentary inspiration is good, but it's temporary. So they come there and then that causes them to run into a brick wall, because you can only have so much inspiration. So that's where I think the root cause, it starts much earlier than university.
And when we've been talking about the different things that Islamic organizations can offer the Muslim students, is you mentioned something about a development program, leadership even program for these individuals, because they are going to be the future of the Muslim communities, wherever they're studying, wherever they grow up to be, or whether it's any kind of field that they're going to be working in, or even choose not to work in, they are the future of the Muslim community. So they need to really, there should be a really big focus on them.
Agreed. I think the thing is, before even just their development and them being future leaders, there's another story to tell, which is, as they call, the boogeyman story. It's a scare story, right? What Pew tells us, the American Social Statistical Agency, it tells us that 1 in 4 Muslims at university level or beyond don't identify as Muslim any longer. 1 in 4. That's 25%. That's an American statistic. As with all things American, let's assume it's slightly exaggerated, or let's adjust for the UK. We're more conservative, we're more religious people in the UK, generally speaking. Let's say it's 1 in 6, 1 in 7. It's still a scary statistic. 1 in 6, 1 in 7 Muslims, 10-15% are no longer Muslim. And I think this is true. People who are within the righteous or the religious circles at Islamic Society, the activists in the local masjid, the local scene, they don't realize the vast majority of Muslims are not in the scene with them. Because they just have their bubble. So when I became a chaplain, what I realized is that the Muslim population on campus is triple the size of the ISOC. But they are nowhere near the ISOC. Like in my instance, there were 300 members of the Islamic Society in my local university. There were 1,200 Muslims on campus. Where were they? They weren't in the prayer room. They were on the outskirts, on the fringes. I didn't even know they existed. And how could I cater to them? I didn't even know they existed. So we have this issue. We don't even know where they are. And so that's one side. We have a crisis of Iman at that age group. We have a whole generation, second, third generation of Muslims. They didn't grow up convinced as to why they're Muslim. They find themselves Muslims by culture, by family, by name, but not anything more than that. And they are rotting away, slowly but surely disappearing into the edges. We don't even know what's happening. We don't even know who they are. You know, they say in the army, never leave a man behind.
Yes.
Right. So this has become my mission. Right. We preach a lot to the converted.
Yeah.
People who are in the circle, saying Salah, Zakah. So we want them to learn the tafsir of Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah Al-Mulk. We want to up their level and make them leaders. But we mustn't, at the expense of that, forget everybody else who's currently just rotting away.
Yeah.
It's like the way I like to try to explain to some people, it's like we're selling some vegetables and it's all shiny at the top, but the moment you lift the first 5 tomatoes, underneath it's all black and it's all rotting away. That's the crisis of Iman that we have, the underbelly of young Muslims in the UK. The second thing then we have some amazing people.
Yeah.
The Islamic Society committee members, those people who are in the youth scene, who are in da'wah scene, try to memorize Quran. There is a revival happening.
Yes.
And it's about how can we push them to the next level. So there's those two things to juggle.
And then, Sheikh, so with those people who are on the outskirts, you know, maybe people may argue we don't have enough resources to go and find these individuals, you know. How would we counter that?
I think with anything, it's not about do we have enough resource, it's about what do you prioritize.
Okay.
With the finite resource you have, you make your choices. What am I going to prioritize for? With most da'wah scene, masjid scene, Islamic society scene, they're so occupied with just maintaining the existing. They don't have the bandwidth to think about the people who are not in the pool yet.
Yeah.
You know, the outreach is not there.
Yeah.
Not as much anyway. Or they don't know how to do it, etc. So that tends to be the problem, is it's not made a priority. And naturally, juggling both is hard.
Yeah, of course.
Right? But you can't completely eliminate one duty. If you look at the Prophet ﷺ in Mecca, first 13 years of his messengerhood, he had 2 duties. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? قُمْ فَأَنذِرْ, go and warn. وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ, go and warn people and glorify Allah. So go out and spread the message. You know, so he's writing letters to kings and emperors. He didn't forget that duty. He's going and speaking to the leaders of the chiefs of tribes of Ta'if, of Bani Thaqif, of Bani Muttalib, of Bani Hashim. The outreach effort is there. At the same time, he doesn't neglect the duty to develop the leaders. So he has Darul Arqam, that house where the Sahaba secretly gather, and he reminds them through the Quran and teaches them through the Quran. So it is a strategic decision.
Yeah.
To deprioritize the outreach and to leave them suffering at the edges. That's kind of how I see it.
What are some of the ways in which, if we were to, you know, be strategic and prioritize, how would we attract this generation and that age group to, you know, learn more and be even interested?
Subhanallah. I think there's the most important thing, if you want to do that, there's a couple of things, but the most important thing is to be relevant. You know, so let's say, for instance, you know, you have a masjid that wants to reach out to youth, and they want to teach the 40 hadith of Imam al-Nawawi, or they want to teach the tafsir of Surah Al-Mulk. The lad on the street, who's in his world or her world, let's talk about a young lad, for instance, on the streets. He's thinking about, you know, my friends are all smoking weed. They want me to smoke weed. I'm stuck. You know, my friend wants me to, you know, go out to the club with them, the pub with them, or I've got some boys in a gang and they want me to join, and they want me to, and somebody's on the streets out for me. What do? That's his world.
Yeah.
This 40 hadith poster is not going to bring him in. So that's the first thing. Is even if it's just the packaging, but the way we present, the way we market, the way we brand has to touch those people's day-to-day problems. You know. It's got to be talking to them. It's got to be about the things they care about.
What about incentives?
I think it's important to incorporate play into the masjid. We know about the Prophet ﷺ in the famous hadith that he used to reduce the length of his salah. كان يخفف في الصلاة إذا سمع بكاء الصبي, if he heard the crying of a child. So the idea is there's a crying child in the masjid, right? And the child is able to run around and play in the masjid. We know the Prophet ﷺ, for instance, in Musnad Ahmad that he stopped his khutbah because he saw his two grandsons enter the masjid wearing two red shirts, and they just looked cute. They looked adorable. And he broke his khutbah, stopped the khutbah, and picked them up. And then he recited the ayah, إِنَّمَا أَمْوَالُكُمْ وَأَوْلَادُكُمْ fitna, your wealth and children are a fitna, a test. So the masjid has to be welcoming for the children.
Yeah.
Right, these spaces, masjid, has to be welcoming for young people. That's first thing. So having a table tennis table in the masjid or in the prayer room, having a pool table, having or maybe in a communal space next to the masjid, or some specific time of the week where they can come and they can play. That's really important to draw them in through play.
Yeah.
To draw them in through fun, and then to, even when they're in, it's not to front load it with education. Like they've been bombarded from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. They want a break. So we give them the break, and then we just drop the reminder. And I think that's been quite a successful method in most masajid. What we try to do for the older years, I work with an organization called Roots Academy.
Yes.
So we try to deliver a structured Islamic education across 16 to 20 universities across the UK. What we try to do, we have a weekly class, but the class is extremely interactive.
Yes.
So we have a rule: the instructor cannot speak for more than 10 minutes without giving them a question or a discussion. When we're teaching about, let's say, when we're teaching the seerah, when we're teaching about the Meccan period, we're discussing Islamophobia.
Yeah.
When we're teaching about Amul Huzn, the year of sorrow, we're discussing anxiety and depression. When we're discussing, for instance, Iman, when we're talking about Iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're discussing atheist arguments and why they're flawed. You have to always bring it back to the relevant question.
Yeah.
The question that's circling in their mind.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we end up, a famous da'iyah once, 10 years ago, when I was a little child, famous da'iyah, he told me, he said, when we go to study Islam, we go like this, we get closer and closer to Allah. And then from here, we are talking down to the audience. What you need to do, you need to come down the stairs to their level and talk to them like this. This famous statement of Ali ibn Abi Talib, كَلِّمِ النَّاسَ عَلَىٰ قَدْرِ عُقُولِهِمْ. Talk to people at their level.
Yeah.
أَتُرِيدُونَ أَن يُكَذَّبَ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ. If you don't, Allah and His Messenger will be rejected. The consequence.
Yeah.
So I think it comes down to that relevance. We have to be relevant. We have to look relevant. We have to speak about relevant matters to them.
Yeah.
They will come.
Subhanallah. Jazakallah khair. Speaking again about the university, scene and those students that are in university, at that particular time in their life, what would you say that you've come across has been the biggest challenge for them? The biggest challenge that they face when they're at university?
I think in my mind there's probably three. The top one of them is what Neil Postman, a famous writer who passed away maybe about a couple of decades ago, he calls it entertaining ourselves to death. That's, I think, the biggest. At the moment, with Netflix, Amazon Prime, and so many other places, so many other sources of entertainment, TikTok, Instagram, you just have so many sources, so many options for a person's mind, for a person to distract themselves with entertainment, for a person to binge watch a TV series, for a person to spend the whole evening watching movies. You have now, today, unlike ever before, you have more, like in one mobile phone, you have like 50, 60, 100,000 different options for you to spend 6 hours in bed. And if you don't have any self-motivation to do anything with your lives, you will spend 6 hours in bed. There's a statistic that the average 18 to 25-year-old spends 4 to 6 hours a day on their mobile phone. I would say, like, at that university level, just anecdotally, that's true. And it's not just their mobile phone. They're spending it watching TV series. They're spending it watching movies. It's escapism. I have nothing to do with I don't know what to do with myself. So let me escape into another world, the world of this TV show, this TV series, this movie.
Yeah.
That's what I would say is the number one thing taking them away, is there's so much sucking them away from thinking. It's al-ghafla. That's what I would say is the biggest problem, al-ghafla. Ghafla in Arabic translated to roughly as heedlessness, distraction.
Yeah.
And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَلَا تَكُن مِّنَ الْغَافِلِينَ وَلَا تَكُونُوا. Don't be like those. كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ. Don't be like those who forgot Allah. فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُم. He made them forget themselves. That's where they are at the moment. They forgot Allah. There's no remembrance of Allah, real remembrance of Allah on a day-to-day basis. And so they have come to a stage where they've just forgotten themselves. So how many, when I was a chaplain, how many day-to-day cases of anxiety, depression I have to deal with? Somebody's been in bed for 4 weeks. What have you been doing in bed for 4 weeks? I'm just depressed. I'm just watching Netflix for 4 weeks. That's where they are. They don't know what to do with themselves. That's one. The second issue we have, and you could say temptation, distraction, ghafla, this idea of heedlessness. The second thing, after entertaining yourselves to death, is the issue of like intellectual doubts, shubuhat. This is the second biggest problem. It doesn't affect everyone. I would say a smaller subset of people. The brainiacs, the smarter ones, the people who like to think. And if they've been brought up on a version of Islam that's purely cultural, and they've been told, don't think about Islam, don't ask questions. They come to university, they're studying sociology, they're studying gender theory, they're studying physics, they're studying the God particle. They're studying physical sciences, vast majority of them, because that's what happens with immigrants, right? Biology, chemistry, physics, engineering, science. They're studying these sciences, and imbued within it is atheism and kufr. And this is the standard at which they're studying it is so advanced, so intelligent, so mathematical, so philosophical, that for them, the Islam that they know is 5 pillars, something basic. There's no proof for what we believe. Then they fall into doubt. And then slowly but surely, the most shocking thing for me, the first day I was a chaplain at university, I had office hours, and somebody on the Islamic Society committee came into the office, on the committee that runs the whole Islamic Society. And this person sat there and said, I'm not sure if God exists anymore. That was like a train hit me in the face. If you're not sure, what about the rest of them? I've got my work cut out for me. So that's the second. And the third thing I would say is the challenge of identity. There's identity is complicated. It's a cocktail. It's ethnic identity, like you're Yemeni, right?
Yemeni Kenyan.
Yemeni Kenyan, right? There we go. Already there's a cocktail there. I'm Indian Pakistani, right? And now I have to deal with the idea of being British, right? British, ethnic. There's ethnic identity. There's religious identity. There's your social peers, your social circle, where you grew up, where you're from, your profession. Okay, I'm an engineer. That's a part of all of this complex is there, and then at the same time there is an attack on identifying as a Muslim. So people feel shy amongst their peers with non-Muslim colleagues, etc., to say like, I'm going for salah. They'll say, I'm going to the toilet. I'm going on lunch break. They don't have that confidence to say, I'm a Muslim. They can't articulate themselves. They're scared. So that's the third one. And I think, so in that order, you have the challenge of entertainment and distraction, lack of purpose, the challenge of doubts, of the intellectual attack on Islam, happening especially at the university context. And we are losing Muslims by the droves. Afwaja. يَخْرُجُونَ مِن دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا on campus. With these 2 eyes, I have seen it. Right? In a day, I'll have 10 counseling sessions, 10 consultancy sessions. All 10 will be Muslims who are like, I'm not really sure about anything anymore. I didn't realize this was happening. I was living in my sweet bubble. When you give a khutbah or you give a talk, you are distanced from the congregation.
You are,
But the moment you come close and you actually realize what's going on, I said, it's a train hits me in the face. So those are the 3 top challenges, I'd say.
I admit that even being at the Masjid, we are in our own bubble as well. And there's something that you mentioned, preaching to the converted. That's so powerful, because that outreach is there, but I feel sometimes the outreach is for non-Muslims.
We don't realize that, like I said, the number of Muslims in the Masjid or in the Islamic Society or in the bubble, I would say on average 3 times that number is outside the bubble. They're struggling to even pray their 5 salah. They're struggling to even fast their Ramadan fasts. They're struggling to just do the basics. It might be upbringing, it might be pressure from their community, from their culture. They didn't get used to it. Various possible, but they're just struggling to just survive as a believer. And we lose sight because we don't mix with those people. This is why the Prophet ﷺ says in the hadith, it's attributed to him. Scholars debate its authenticity. Ad-deenu mu'amala. This deen is about interaction. Or a more authentic hadith, أن تخالط الناس وتصبر على أذاهم خير لك min an la tukhalit an-nas wa an la tasbir ala them. For you to mix with the people and know and be patient with the harm you get from them is better than for you to be aloof and just be by yourself.
Because you won't know, you'll
never know.
You'll never know.
And
subhanAllah, I believe that anyone watching this podcast, listening to what you're saying, will be like, I had no idea. I never realized. Because especially when you are in the university scene, it really opens your eyes into that actual kind of world with these situations and these brothers and sisters. They exist, and you have like you mentioned, those who are on like the outskirts, and then those people who are in the committee, and they're doing their best. And I remember when I was speaking to various committee members, because we run the British Muslim students, and just get a gist of what the ISOC needs and so on and so forth. And they always push for so many socials. We just need to do so many social events. That's
the outreach.
Yeah, that's the outreach. It says otherwise no one's going to come.
No, it's very true.
If I just stick so many durus and this class and Quran circles and stuff like that, they just like, no, I'll go and join the basketball club, or I'll join the badminton team, and somewhere else and mix with the non-Muslims.
I remember something very vivid from my freshman year in my first university, Freshers Week. The Islamic Society had a dinner, and I'm sat there. This gentleman sitting next to me, and I'd never seen him before. We're both new to university, and he said, "You know what? I'm just so happy to be sat here with a bunch of Asians eating curry." And I looked at him, looked at the other brothers around me, thinking, I don't think Islamic Society, I don't think that was the purpose. But look, this gentleman, right? I think the whole year after that, I probably saw him in the masjid 2 times. He was just looking, his ethnic identity, right? That was what he was relating to. He was just looking for some curry with some brothers. And he found that. But as he sat there, someone recited Quran and someone gave a reminder. And what if that planted the seed? So sometimes it's the things we don't think are going to make the greatest difference. We're used to preaching. But the Prophet ﷺ, his method, a lot of it was mixing with people, was emotionally touching them. For instance, famous hadith of Jabir, Sahih Muslim, the Muslim armies goes forward, Jabir is lagging behind. The Prophet ﷺ stops and he waits, he lags behind with Jabir, and he asks him, how are things? How's family? How are you looking to get married? How's that going? Jabir says, I'm trying to find someone older because she can look after my younger sisters. My parents passed away. Okay, right. Or why is your camel so slow? Like he cares. He cares about the small details about Jabir's life. And that's it. It's just that we are used to preaching from afar. But the Prophet ﷺ, he would mix flesh and blood with them. When he talks to Ibn Abbas, famous hadith, he puts his arm on his shoulder. Then he says, he's on the same horse. They're touching skin to skin, back to front. He says, my son, let me give you some good advice. Ya ghulam inni u'allimuka kalimat. When the Prophet ﷺ teaches Mu'adh ibn Jabal what to say after salah, he says, Ya Mu'adh inni la uhibbuk. I love you, Mu'adh. Mu'adh says, Allamani Rasulullah ﷺ ash-shahada kama. Hand in hand, the Prophet ﷺ taught me the shahada. How to say tashahud, Kama yu'allimuni surat bil-Qur'an. This hand in hand, this closeness, this intimacy with the people. This is what the Prophet ﷺ taught us. So his da'wah was not a preaching from afar. That was saved for a Friday. But his da'wah was that the orphan girl, the little girl in Medina could grab his hand and he would just follow her. It's a different flavor. It's a different flavor of da'wah.
It's so maybe it would be equivalent to say today grassroots.
I would say when we teach the roots instructors, we tell them try to find KitKat moments. What is a KitKat moment? One time long ago I was in a class, 3-hour class in a 40 hadith class in university, and the teacher after the class, it was like 11 p.m. when we finished, and we're walking back to the prayer room and he said, SubhanAllah, I realized I haven't eaten for 12 hours. And he took out a KitKat from his pocket. He said, Allahu Akbar, I found something. So he opens the KitKat, a 2-bar, not the 4-bar. And there were 6 of us. And he broke the 2-bar into 6.
SubhanAllah.
And I knew he was starving. He broke into 6. He said, I'm not going to eat until you all eat with me. This KitKat moment was more important, was ablagh. It had more of an impact on me than the 3 hours he spoke for.
SubhanAllah.
So we say to our teachers, look for these moments. When you teach at an Islamic society, at a university, mix with the students, talk to them, chat with them, go to ISOC football, mess about with them, be close to them, know their deepest, darkest secrets, know who they are, and then look for your KitKat moment.
I like that. I'm definitely taking
You
that.
need to don't eat the whole KitKat.
Taking the KitKat moments. Now, Ustad, when we talk about these youth, how much focus should the du'at or those people who are wanting to make a difference in their life, how much of a focus can be on their parents? Because earlier you spoke about how madrasah being, like childcare. Yeah. And that's something that happens all over the country. By the way, I've been in different madrasas, and I think I've spoke about it here as well. You have the kids being in madrasa, adhan is going off for salah, they're being picked up and the parents drive away.
Yes, that's very common, right?
Yeah.
I have a vivid memory. My first teaching experience was actually in a madrasa teaching kids.
Yeah.
And, there's a 6-year-old, 7-year-old kid. And I remember that on the parents-teacher meeting, his parent came, "Oh, my kid knows everything. Guys didn't do a good job. I'm going to move him to a different madrasa." I said, "Okay, 1 second." I called the little boy, "Come here." We talked about praying Fajr, right? And that Fajr is one of the 5 salahs, the 5 pillars of Islam. Yes. You told me something in the class about why you don't pray Fajr. He said, "Yeah. It's because my wake up." He's about 8 years old. He goes, "I wake up. My dad tells me, go back to sleep. You got school. Don't worry about Fajr." The child is waking up of his own accord. Which child does that?
Yeah.
And the parent is telling them, "No, Habibi, go to sleep."
Yeah.
So I looked at the parent. I said, you can take him to 1,000 madrasas. But that thing that you did, he will never forget for the rest of his life. He will learn from that more than he learns from me. You are the dad. Some things cannot be outsourced.
Yeah.
A large portion of, if you want to go to the root cause of all of this that I'm talking about, this entertainment, this kind of doubt, a lot of it starts with the family. And the family is under attack.
Yeah.
Right? First there's this push for dual working households. Get the mum out the house. A mother has no value until she's contributing to the GDP of the economy. Oh, you're not working full time? Oh, you're jobless, sitting at home, doing nothing. Okay, so that's the first thing. That's the first attack. Get the mum out the house. Both parents are exhausted at 6 p.m. now. They don't want to look at their kids. They can barely think for themselves, barely breathe, barely eat and drink. Right, childcare. And then there becomes a disconnect between what the child is learning at the masjid, what they're doing at home. A lot of attention needs to be given in the next decade to parents and how to parent and how a sound family home. The home is supposed to be the calm amidst the storm. There is a storm outside.
Yeah.
Child goes outside the house. There's everything against them. All the odds are stacked against them. A society that doesn't believe in Allah, a society that doesn't believe in God, full stop. Christian values are disappearing or have disappeared. Drugs, peer pressure, women, men, temptation. All of this is stacked up against them. And they come running home to mum and dad. And mum and dad are watching something on TV and saying, "Relax, put something on for them. Pacify the kid." The top 5 most watched videos on YouTube are those cartoons, specific cartoons that parents play for their kids to shut them up. We have a lot more to do, but there's a deeper problem there, which is it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
A lot more pressure is now placed on the 2 parents, on the nuclear family, than the wider community. The uncles, the aunts, the ammus, the khalas, the uncles in the masjid, the friends. And so that jama'ah needs to help solve that problem, that of the family. But there's a lot that needs to be done for parents. Parenting courses, how to have a sound family home. The Prophet ﷺ as a father, how mothers of the believers used to be as mothers. How to deal with sibling rivalry from Surah Yusuf. How to deal with issues in the household, issues, extended families through Surah Al-Hujurat.
Yeah.
This is going to help. If we don't help the family unit resurrect itself, nothing we do outside the family unit, it's all going to be damage control.
Yeah. And I think, having these discussions in the first place is a step towards that, because it's, as they say, it's identifying the problem is the first part of, on the way to dealing with the problem. And it is, everything you mentioned, when I'm speaking to you and I'm sitting here as a parent myself, it's resonating. It resonates with myself, and I pray it resonates with everyone who's watching, and to make a difference between, obviously I'm a young parent and my kids have yet to get to that age where they're going to go to university, So I want to make sure that
May Allah protect them.
I mean, all of us. I want to make sure that I guide him into the right decision. And our oldest is 12, and he asks me, what do you want me to be when I grow up?
Allah.
What do you want me to be when I grow up? And I will say, I want you to be a good man. I want you to be a good person. Because it's like me and my brother were having this conversation one time, about being a doctor, that being something to a family that can be proud of. Oh, my son is a doctor, or whatever. And I turned around and I said to him, but what if your son is a doctor, but he's an evil person? He's just really nasty. No akhlaq. He's just like, how will you benefit from my son being a doctor? He doesn't come to visit you.
Allah.
So what's the point? What's the point?
What was the point of it all? So I think this comes back to what, as Muslims, what do we consider is an education?
Yeah.
A lot of people say, my kids should be educated. What is an education? Even in the Christian and Judeo-Christian traditions, education was about creating a virtuous person of good character and good morals.
Yeah.
And then when they're 18, then they learn a trade, a craft, welding, carpenting, cleaning, whatever, bricklaying. They learn a craft. It takes them a year to become a craftsperson. They go on an apprenticeship. But the bulk of that education is about moral values. This is what's most important, is as parents, there's so much tuition, football club, judo, there's so many things people send their kids to.
Yeah.
But those values are built from the home.
Yeah.
And it's with kids, especially under the age of 10, they don't listen, they imitate. That's the scariest part. For a parent, the scariest part is when they see their child expressing anger or acting in a negative way that they've picked from mom or dad. That's what being a parent is a mirror. You start to see yourself in a different light, and it scares you, and it helps you improve yourself. So I would say it's a lot has to change. We can't change, to some extent. We're not able to change what happens in schools in terms of what's the fundamentals of that education. But the only thing we have is we have a few hours in the evening to play with. Or we start alternative schooling and redefine completely what that education is supposed to be. But when they come home, I would say, just as an advice to parents, I'm also a parent myself, a father of 3, is that under the age of 12, storytelling is the best educational technique. Bedtime stories. Musa alayhi salam and Fir'aun, now we're in Ashura, Musa and Fir'aun, Noah and the sea, the stories of the prophets, and then to live the values yourself. That's what the child really going to pick up. And sometimes you cannot give the child anything other than those two things. You don't have much time with your children. They say, the psychologists say, the average parent has 20 minutes of one-to-one time with their child. So you have 20 minutes to play with. What do? I'd say tell them a story. Right? So this is, I think, not our mawdu', but tangent.
Tangent, and you know what, would you agree in saying that because of, again, talking about, being families that were immigrants, who have witnessed poverty, the instinct is to give them the craft first,
of course,
skill first.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I would not want poverty for them.
Yes.
And in there we forget about,
Yeah, it's a human instinct, the instinct for survival. But if I take you to Ibrahim alayhi salam.
Yeah.
Ibrahim alayhi salam leaves his family in the barren desert. في واد غير ذي زرع. Place, no vegetation, no potential for anything. Dead. And he's now making dua to Allah. Oh Allah, I left my family in the middle of nowhere. What's the first thing you and me would ask Allah? Oh Allah, some food, rain, burgers, steak. let them survive, let them eat, let them drink. ربنا ليقيموا الصلاة. First thing he asks Allah, oh Allah, make them establishers of salah. First thing. Second thing, فَجْعَلْ أَفْئِدَةً مِّنَ النَّاسِ تَهْوِي إِلَيْهِمْ. Make people want to surround them. Community. وَارْزُقْهُم مِّنَ الثَّمَرَاتِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَشْكُرُونَ. He asked for rizq. He didn't even get silver or gold. He got bronze, 3rd place.
SubhanAllah.
Salah, community, and then oh Allah, feed them. Salah is an interesting thing. Salah is usually the breaking point for what I've noticed in young Muslims.
Yeah.
It's usually, and I've noticed many times, someone stops praying Salah, a young man stops praying Salah, and then they stop wearing hijab. It's the start of the dominoes. They start doubting Allah. Why am I here? فَخَلَفَ مِن بَعْدِهِمْ خَلْفٌ. Allah says, أَضَاعُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَاتَّبَعُوا الشَّهَوَاتِ. A generation came that stopped praying salah. They all went in the direction of their desires and temptations. If a parent can role model the enjoyment of salah to their kids and care about, if we can establish salah and a solid community, the rizq will come. The other thing I would say about professions and rizq, it is a natural instinct, because of no parent wants their child to be living off benefits, to be living off social housing. We want our children to be better off than us, and we absolutely have to make that happen.
Yeah.
That mentoring, that professional mentoring, that encouragement, that absolutely has to be there. But that should not be the core message. The core message should be رَبَّنَا لِيُقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ. And then the last thing should be, oh Allah, make them. There's another thing, I think, strategic decision, I would say to all parents. The last 30, 40, 50 years of British Muslims in the UK, there was that survival instinct pushed them to say, my kids have to be doctors, engineers, lawyers.
Yeah.
The next decade is a different ball game. And most people hearing this, if they're in the UK, they're second or third generation Muslims.
Yeah.
We have to change the professions that we push our children into, that we encourage them to. Of course, there's an element of personal passion and interest, but there's an element of being strategic. A few years ago, today Muslims parents are protesting outside schools for something, and that thing went into law, became legislation 6-7 years ago. We are 6 years late.
Yeah.
Where were we when the legislation was being decided?
Yeah.
Why there's no Muslim lawyers, barristers, solicitors, think tanks, researchers? The social sciences right now, if Muslims are to be ready, if you look at what's happening in Europe, the rise of the far right, in Germany, France, other countries, etc. If Muslims are to be ready for the avalanche on our values, that Islamophobia that's taking place in every part of the system, if we want to be ready, we need Muslims to go into those social sciences, into law, into politics, into political theory, to learn how to advocate for our rights, to protect our future generations. That's something I would say for Muslim parents to think about, that there needs to be a strategic shift. The next 20 years is not like the last 20 years.
Yeah.
All of the freedoms and the ease that we had, there's a different tone coming, and we need to be ready for that. And if every Muslim is a doctor, it's great, for them to earn a 6-figure salary. But then, for instance, female doctors have to be bare below the elbows. They can't wear their hijab properly.
Yeah.
But who's going to advocate for that? That's where the other professions come. There's something for parents to think about.
Jazakallah khair. Barakallah feek. Sheikh, when it's I don't want to go from any more tangents, inshallah, because I know what I wanted to discuss with you was primarily, these the youth, because of, especially with your background and where you've been engaged in the da'wah scene primarily, and something that we have been trying to put a focus on here in the masjid, and there's different ways that you can do things, so you mentioned earlier play, by incorporating play. Would that be the same for the university students as well, incorporating some sort of fun into it as well, or are there other kind of different ways they can go in it? Because there are things that draw them to, like you mentioned, the things that they studied in biology, physics, whatever it is, that there's things that draw them to those arguments against Islam, that makes you think, this is the stuff I've learned is nothing. Is there a counter for that?
Yeah, I think it differs. Let's say the bait to draw in the fish. The bait differs based on age group demographic. Okay. Right. So a younger audience, let's say pre-18, you're talking about play, talking about console games, talking about table tennis, talking about football in the masjid. Whatever you can do to bring them in and to feel comfortable and to have an attachment to that masjid. When you're talking about post-18, outside the masjid context now, university, it's a different ball game. One big driver is community. Like at university, they feel a loss of community. They feel alone. They feel isolated. So to feel in a familiar territory, to feel comfortable, to have that welcoming approach, this is where the socials come in. Complementing the socials. And part of the social has to be fun. If you think about it this way, a Muslim university student should not think that because I'm a Muslim at university, my university life has to be depressing. All of my mates are going on all of these impermissible journeys of enjoyment late into the night.
Yeah.
And my life is miserable. No, you can have fun too. And so we need to create that space for them to just come and enjoy themselves in a halal environment. That's one. There's another driver, like I said. There are people who are hungry to learn. They realize they don't know anything about Islam. They don't know the basics. They have doubts. They have fears. Or let's say they're going through something in life. You know, their mother abandoned them. Or they didn't grow up in a single parent household. They're looking for answers. They're hungry. This is where we need to provide them with something interactive that addresses their questions, but at the same time it's building a foundation. So at Roots Academy we try to provide this program called the Essentials. The Essentials program is currently it will be delivered inshallah in 20 campuses coming September across the country. And the idea is, you know, we have 100, 150, 200 students coming every week, and it's a highly interactive session teaching them the basics from Iman, Islam, Ihsan, Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, etc. But it's answering their questions. It's giving them room to think. One of the biggest mistakes we do with this older category, 18 to 25, we think we have to teach them like we teach kids. So it's a monologue, the teacher speaking at the classroom. These guys, when they leave this Islamic studies classroom and they go into their nuclear physics lecture or their biochemistry lecture, they are treated as intelligent adults. They are evaluating, analyzing, answering their lecturers, writing assignments, making arguments. In the Islamic studies classroom, they are a toddler. So the idea is make them do the cognitive work. Ask them a question, let them do the thinking, the group discussion, let them come up with the answers, let them feel engaged, let them feel that Islam, you know, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say about Islam? لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ. It came to overpower every other ideology. Let them feel that it is the superpower in the room. Let them feel it is greater, more intelligent, more compelling than anything being sold to them outside this, you know, in any other lecture hall. And part of that is making them feel that Islam is built on evidence, and is built on truth, and is built on solid foundations, and this is what we're here to learn and to develop, etc. So developing that idea, a Muslim does not mean you don't think. Rather, the fact that you think critically means you are a better Muslim. And to nurture that, you know, to nurture that thinking, Allah says, فَتَفَكَّرُوا أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, to nurture that thinking in a way that takes them towards Allah. Because there's 9 other people outside the classroom trying to nurture their thinking in a way to pull them away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So to teach them, for example, you know, how to deal with a doubt. You know, your lecturer brings in, he says, you know, the Higgs boson is a God particle, God doesn't exist. How do you deal with that? In that moment, you need an answer. How does a Muslim deal with it? To give them the tools to deal with those doubts, you know, to not drown, to not get submerged. And that's, I think, one of the most important things. That's what we teach in the Roots classroom, and I believe even the GLM with the youth is something Sheikh Mustafa, I know, focuses on, giving them the tools to deal with those questions.
Jazakallah khair. Ustad, we could sit here, you know, for more time and hours and just discussing this, but if you could give me, inshallah, from our discussion, a point or a conclusion or something that you would like the audience to walk away with after listening to the discussion, what would that be?
I'm going to split this conclusion into 2.
Tafadhal.
First, I'm going to talk to the young Muslims. Shabab, you know, whether you're a teenager, a young man, young woman, this deen needs you. How much more time are we going to spend on Netflix? How much more time are we going to spend chilling with our mates? How much more time, you know, in the local burger joint? How much more time are we going to spend wasting our lives? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you for a purpose. This deen needs you. We need every able-bodied person we can get fighting in the trenches with us. Get up, learn, develop yourself, you know, become lethal, develop your skill set. Don't let anybody sell you this idea that is deen or dunya. Be somebody who develops important skills in this dunya, whether it's a craft, a trade, a profession. Be useful to this community, to society. Ahabbu nasi Allah anfa'uhum linnas, the most beloved people to Allah, the most beneficial to people. And also, equally, give that same attention to the Quran. Start with the Quran. There's so much division right now amongst young Muslims, different sects, different groups, warring, fighting, debates online, offline. If I had one thing to tell you, drink from the sweet fountain of the Quran. That's, if you spend your university years memorizing, studying, learning the meanings of the Quran, you will not go wrong. Attach yourself to the words of Allah. Make yourself somebody who is, on one hand, useful to society in a profession, in a craft, master something, and at the same time, somebody who has a serious journey in learning about the Quran and learning the deen of Allah in a structured manner. Enough motivation reminders. Move on. We need to be ready. We need to worship Allah upon knowledge. That's my message to the young people. We need to stop entertaining ourselves to death. We need to start preparing ourselves for our death. To the parents, it's a different advice.
Yeah.
I say for parents, the greatest thing we can give young Muslims is our time, quality time. Play football with them, spend time with them. Ibrahim alayhi salam is building the Kaaba with Ismail. He doesn't need Ismail, he's a small child. How is he going to build a Kaaba? But he wants to do it with him, to bond. Give our children time. Make sacrifices for our children. We will see the fruits later on. Our children are only going to ever they're only going to ever get what we put in. They're only going to be what they see from us. If we live the values, they will absorb them. If we preach the values and we don't live them, they will absorb something from somewhere else. And right now they have 15 other opportunities and sources for their tarbiyah, for their upbringing. Yeah. Our voice needs to be the loudest, needs to be the most loving, needs to be need to create that sense of attachment. Last message to the masjids. Bring them in through play. Deal with the uncles later. Put out the table tennis tables, put out the punching bag, put out the pool table, and get one of the uncles to speak to the uncles and say, look, it's either this or we lose a generation. There's no third option. It's either this or we lose a generation. Those are my 3 concluding messages, inshallah.
Allah yabarak fi. Jazakallah khair. It's an absolute pleasure to have you and having this discussion with you. Allah bless you.
Likewise.
Alhamdulillah. Inshallah, with that, we'll end this podcast. I've been Muhammad Basaid here with Ustadh Hisham. First and foremost, I'd like to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for allowing us to have this conversation. And secondly, of course, it wouldn't be right except that I thank our guest. May Allah bless him, bless his family. And remember to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, Subhanak Allahumma bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfirullah wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.